Chapter 1. The Whispers in the Walls. The old house stood on a slight rise, a skeletal silhouette against the perpetually bruised sky. Locals called it Blackwood Manor, though no Blackwoods had resided there for generations. It was a place whispered about in hushed tones, a repository of shadows and silence that the town of Hollow Creek, nestled in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, had learned to fear. Elias Thorne, a man who had spent a lifetime chasing the fringes of the unknown, had, of course, been drawn to it like a moth to a particularly malevolent flame. The rumors, as always, had been the lure. Stories of the manor's original owner, Silas Blackwood, a man whose obsession with the occult had consumed him, and perhaps the very house itself. Tales of rituals performed within its walls, of sacrifices made to entities best left undisturbed, and of a haunting so profound that it had seeped into the very stones, leaving an indelible mark of dread. The house had stood vacant for nearly a century, a monument to unspoken horrors. No one dared to venture near, save for a few reckless teenagers, and even they rarely lasted long. Most simply vanished. I had arrived in Hollow Creek a week prior, ostensibly to escape the relentless drizzle of the city. The truth, as it often did, was far more complicated. I was searching for something, a tangible link to the intangible, a glimpse into the heart of darkness that I knew, with a morbid certainty, beat within us all. The abandoned mansion, with its reputation as a nexus of the uncanny, promised precisely that. The first few days were spent observing. I rented a small cabin on the outskirts of town, a safe distance from the oppressive atmosphere that seemed to emanate from Blackwood Manor. I spoke with the few remaining locals willing to discuss the house, gathering fragmented narratives, distorted by time and fear. Each account painted a different picture, but a common thread of unease and terror bound them together. The wind, they said, carried whispers from the walls, voices that called out to the unwary, promising forbidden knowledge. The shadows within the house shifted, morphing into grotesque shapes that preyed on the minds of those who dared to gaze upon them. And the air itself, they claimed, was thick with the scent of decay, a premonition of the end. They had all seen the place, or a version of it, in their dreams. My analytical mind, honed by years of research, categorized these accounts as folklore, products of overactive imaginations fueled by superstition and isolation. Yet I couldn't dismiss them entirely. There was an undercurrent of authenticity, a palpable sense of dread that lingered in the air when the manor was mentioned. It was a feeling that resonated with something deep within me, a primal fear that I hadn't known existed. After a week of gathering information and preparing, I decided it was time to enter. The late afternoon sun cast long, skeletal shadows across the overgrown grounds as I approached the mansion. The wrought iron gate, twisted with rust and age, hung precariously from a single hinge. I pushed it open, the mournful screech echoing in the stillness, and stepped onto the property. The air grew heavy, the temperature dropping a few degrees as I moved closer. The once manicured lawns were now a tangled mess of weeds and thorny bushes, the remnants of a forgotten garden. The house itself was a masterpiece of decay, its once imposing facade marred by cracks and crumbling stone. The windows were dark, like vacant eyes staring out at the world. I had expected a sense of foreboding, a palpable weight of darkness. But there was something else, a peculiar stillness that was more unnerving. It was a silence that seemed to absorb all sound, a vacuum in which the whispers of the wind were swallowed whole. Armed with a powerful flashlight, a camera, and a notebook, I approached the front door. It was made of heavy oak, reinforced with iron bands. A large, ornate knocker, shaped like a grotesque gargoyle, hung in the center. Hesitantly, I reached out and rapped on the door. The sound echoed hollowly within the house, a single, lonely percussive note. A silence. I tried again with more force. Still nothing. It was as if the house was holding its breath, waiting. I tried the handle, surprised to find it unlocked. With a deep breath, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The interior was a study in shadows. Dust motes danced in the slivers of sunlight that managed to penetrate the grimy windows, illuminating the grand foyer. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and something else, something indefinable but undeniably unpleasant. The ornate wallpaper, once vibrant, was now peeling, revealing patches of bare plaster beneath. A massive, ornate chandelier, its crystals clouded with grime, hung precariously from the ceiling. Everything was covered in a thick layer of dust, undisturbed for decades. The silence was even more profound within the house. It was as if the very air had been replaced with a sound-absorbing material. I took a step forward, and my boots crunched on the debris-strewn floor. The initial impression was one of overwhelming grandeur, but the decay was omnipresent. The house had once been a testament to wealth and power, but now it was a crumbling mausoleum, a monument to the inevitable entropy of all things. I began my exploration slowly, systematically, documenting every detail. The first room I entered, to the left of the foyer, appeared to have been a parlor. A grand fireplace dominated one wall, the mantelpiece carved with grotesque figures. The furniture, shrouded in dust sheets, hinted at a life of opulent comfort. A thick layer of dust covered everything, creating the illusion of a sepulchre frozen in time. I moved through the house, room by room. The dining room, with its long, imposing table, was still set for a meal. The chairs were pushed back, as if the occupants had abruptly abandoned their feast. The kitchen, with its massive stove and copper pots, was a testament to a life of service, now abandoned. The bedrooms, with their ornate beds and dressing tables, spoke of lives lived and secrets kept. As I moved through the house, I felt an increasing sense of unease. It was not the fear of the unknown, but a creeping sensation of being watched, of not being alone. The shadows seemed to deepen, to writhe in the periphery of my vision. The silence, once merely unnerving, now felt oppressive, a physical presence pressing down on me. I dismissed these feelings as products of my imagination. The house, after all, was designed to evoke such reactions. It was a testament to the power of suggestion, the ability of our minds to be manipulated by our surroundings. I spent several hours exploring the lower levels, taking photographs, making notes. I found nothing overtly alarming, nothing that would suggest the presence of the supernatural. Yet, the sense of unease persisted, growing with each passing moment. As the sun began to set, casting long, distorted shadows through the windows, I decided to explore the upper floors. The grand staircase, its banister intricately carved with grotesque figures, led upwards. I ascended slowly, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The second floor was much the same as the first, decaying grandeur, dust-covered furniture, and a pervading sense of unease. I explored the bedrooms, the library, and the study, finding nothing of significance. I found a few journals in one of the bedrooms, but the pages were brittle and the ink was faded beyond recognition. The attic was a different story. The air grew noticeably colder as I climbed the final flight of stairs. The space was vast, filled with cobwebs and shadows. Sunlight streamed through a few small, grimy windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The attic contained a collection of forgotten relics, antique furniture, discarded portraits, and trunks filled with moth-eaten clothes. I spent several hours meticulously examining the contents, hoping to find something, anything, that would shed light on the house's history. I found a small wooden box tucked away in a corner. It was intricately carved with strange symbols, unlike anything I had seen before. I opened it carefully, my heart pounding with anticipation. Inside the box was a collection of old photographs, sepia-toned images of the Blackwood family. The faces were unsettling, gaunt, with eyes that seemed to peer directly into my soul. Most of the photos were of Silas Blackwood himself, a man with a severe, almost predatory gaze. In the corner of the box, I found a folded piece of parchment. I unfolded it carefully, revealing a handwritten passage in a language I did not recognize. The ink was old, the script ornate and difficult to decipher. Yet, I felt an undeniable connection to the words, a sense of foreboding that went beyond the usual unease of the house. As I began to examine the other photographs more closely, I noticed something disturbing. In several of the images, shadowy figures seemed to lurk in the background, indistinct shapes that seemed to shift and move as I looked at them. The more I focused, the more these figures seemed to solidify, to take on a more defined form. My heart began to race, my breath catching in my throat. I could feel the weight of the house pressing down on me, the oppressive silence amplifying my fear. I wanted to leave, to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the attic, but I was compelled to stay, drawn in by the unsettling images and the cryptic words on the parchment. As darkness enveloped the house, the whispers began. At first I thought it was the wind, the sound of the aged house settling. But the whispers grew more distinct, more insistent. They seemed to emanate from the walls, from the shadows themselves. They were whispers of secrets, of forbidden knowledge, of the things that lurked beyond the veil. I strained to understand the words, but they were distorted, fragmented, almost beyond comprehension. They spoke of rituals, of sacrifices, of a power that could be wielded by those who dared to look beyond the boundaries of the known. The whispers seemed to be targeting me, weaving their way into my thoughts, planting seeds of doubt and fear. They promised answers, a deeper understanding of the mysteries I sought, but they also warned of the price, the ultimate cost of delving into the abyss. I tried to ignore them to focus on my work, but the whispers were relentless. They swirled around me, an insidious chorus that threatened to consume my sanity. I tried to tell myself it was all a trick of the mind, a manifestation of the house's oppressive atmosphere, but a growing part of me knew it was something more. As the night wore on, the temperature in the attic plunged. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows. The shadows danced, twisting and contorting into grotesque shapes. The photographs in my hands seemed to pulse with an unholy light. I realized I was no longer alone. The shadows were not just shadows anymore. They were entities, things that had been waiting in the dark, feeding on the house's accumulated dread, and now they had found a new source of nourishment, me. I wanted to run, to flee the house and never look back, but the whispers had taken hold. They had sunk their claws into my mind, and I was no longer in control. I found myself drawn to the parchment, to the strange symbols and cryptic words. I felt an undeniable urge to understand, to unlock the secrets of the house. I knew then that I had crossed a threshold, that I was no longer just an observer. I was a participant, and the darkness, with its promise of forbidden knowledge, had claimed me. I looked at the photographs again, now with a sense of understanding that chilled me to the core. The figures in the background were no longer indistinct shadows. They were there, observing me, waiting. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. They promised power, knowledge, and a glimpse into the true nature of reality. I knew I should run, but I could not. The darkness had taken root, and I was its willing host. My exploration had become a descent, a slow walk into the heart of Blackwood Manor. I had begun to understand what my research was about. The house was not just a location, it was a gateway, a very dangerous gateway. I closed my eyes and listened to the whispers. They were calling me home. Chapter 2: The Summons of Silence. The whispers intensified, no longer just sounds but palpable vibrations that resonated within my skull. They coiled around my thoughts, insidious tendrils seeking to supplant my own volition with something ancient and alien. The attic, once a repository of forgotten memories, now felt like the antechamber of a nightmare. The shadows danced with renewed vigor, coalescing into forms that defied easy categorization, their movements fluid and unsettling, like figures glimpsed through a heat haze. I clutched the parchment tighter, its texture strangely warm against my skin. The symbols, once indecipherable, now seemed to writhe before my eyes, each line and curve resonating with a dark energy. I felt an irresistible pull, a compulsion to understand their meaning, to unlock the secrets they held. It was a siren song, promising forbidden knowledge at a cost I was dimly aware of but increasingly willing to pay. The photographs, too, had undergone a transformation. The faces of the Blackwood family, once merely unsettling, now seemed to leer at me, their eyes filled with a predatory hunger. The shadowy figures in the background had become more defined, their forms shifting from amorphous shapes to grotesque parodies of human beings. They were watchers, guardians, and perhaps something more sinister. I tried to focus on my breathing, to ground myself in the present moment, but the whispers were relentless. They eroded my resolve, whispering doubts and fears, amplifying my insecurities, and reminding me of all the failures that had led me to this desolate place. They preyed on my ambition, my hunger for knowledge, and my desperate need to find meaning in a life that often felt devoid of purpose. I knew with a chilling certainty that I was being manipulated. The house, or whatever entity resided within it, was using my own desires against me, luring me deeper into its web of darkness. I should have fled, abandoned my research, and sought refuge in the outside world. But I was trapped, bound by a curiosity that had morphed into obsession. I forced myself to look away from the photographs and the parchment, focusing on the physical space around me. The attic was filled with forgotten relics, remnants of lives lived and lost. Antique furniture, draped in dust sheets, stood like silent sentinels. Discarded portraits, their faces obscured by grime, stared out at the world with vacant eyes. Trunks filled with moth-eaten clothes whispered stories of forgotten fashion and faded dreams. I tried to find something, anything, that would ground me, something that would remind me of the world outside the house, of the reality that existed beyond the suffocating atmosphere of the attic. I rummaged through the trunks, pulling out faded dresses, moth-eaten coats, and yellowed letters. Each item was a fragment of a life, a testament to the enduring power of human experience. But even these relics were tainted by the house's pervasive darkness. The dresses seemed to cling to the shadows, their folds mimicking the shapes of the grotesque figures in the photographs. The coats seemed to exude a faint odor of decay, as if they had been worn by corpses. And the letters, their ink faded beyond recognition, whispered of lost loves and broken promises, of secrets kept and regrets nursed. I felt a growing sense of despair. The house had permeated everything, infecting even the most mundane objects with its malevolent influence. There was no escape, no refuge from its darkness. I was trapped, adrift in a sea of shadows and whispers. As the night deepened, the whispers intensified, coalescing into a chorus of voices, each speaking in a different language, each offering a different temptation. Some spoke of power, of the ability to control the forces of nature, to bend reality to my will. Others spoke of knowledge, of unlocking the secrets of the universe, of understanding the mysteries of life and death. And still others spoke of immortality, of transcending the limitations of the physical body, of living forever in a realm of pure consciousness. I knew these were lies, twisted promises designed to lure me further into the darkness. But the voices were so seductive, so compelling, that I found myself drawn to them, wanting to believe in their promises. The shadows continued to dance, their forms growing more defined, more threatening. They circled me, closing in, their eyes burning with an unholy light. I could feel their presence, their hunger, their desire to consume me. I knew then that I had to act, that I could not succumb to the whispers, that I had to fight back against the darkness that threatened to engulf me. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath, and focused on my will. I tried to summon the strength of my convictions, the principles that had guided my life, the belief in reason and logic that had sustained me through countless challenges. It was a futile effort. The whispers were too strong, the darkness too pervasive. I felt my resolve crumbling, my will eroding. I was losing myself, becoming a vessel for the house's malevolent influence. Then I remembered something. A small, silver crucifix that I had carried with me since childhood, a relic of my Catholic upbringing, a symbol of faith that I had long since abandoned. I had packed it almost unconsciously, a vestige of a past I had tried to leave behind. I fumbled in my pocket, my fingers trembling, and pulled out the crucifix. It was cold to the touch, a stark contrast to the warmth of the parchment. I held it tightly, focusing on its shape, its weight, its significance. As I held the crucifix, the whispers faltered, their voices growing fainter, less insistent. The shadows recoiled, their forms flickering and dissipating. A wave of calm washed over me, a momentary respite from the encroaching darkness. The crucifix was working. It was a barrier, a shield against the house's malevolent influence. But I knew it was only a temporary reprieve. The darkness was still there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to reclaim me. I had to escape. I had to leave the attic to get out of the house, to find refuge in the outside world. I stood up, my legs trembling, and began to walk towards the stairs. The whispers returned, their voices filled with anger and frustration. The shadows lunged, their forms grotesque and menacing. I held the crucifix out in front of me, warding off their attacks. The descent was treacherous. The stairs were steep and uneven, the shadows deep and disorienting. The whispers pursued me, their voices growing louder with each step. As I reached the second floor, I heard a sound, a soft, almost imperceptible scratching coming from behind one of the walls. It was a sound that sent shivers down my spine, a sound that spoke of something ancient and malevolent. The scratching grew louder, more insistent. It was as if something was trying to break through the wall to claw its way into the house. I stopped, frozen in place, listening to the sound. Then the wall began to crack. A thin line appeared, running from the floor to the ceiling. The line widened, the cracks growing larger, the wall beginning to crumble. I backed away, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew what was coming. Something was about to emerge from the wall, something that had been trapped there for centuries, something that was hungry for freedom. The wall shattered, the pieces falling to the floor with a deafening crash. A figure emerged from the debris, its form shrouded in shadows. It was tall and gaunt, its limbs elongated and grotesque. Its face was obscured by darkness, but I could feel its eyes burning into me, filled with an unholy light. The figure moved towards me, its movements slow and deliberate. It was like something from a nightmare, a creature that had been conjured from the depths of my darkest fears. I held the crucifix out in front of me, praying for deliverance. The figure recoiled, hissing in pain. It was vulnerable to the symbol of faith, but its hunger was too strong. It continued to advance, its eyes fixed on me, its intentions clear. I knew I had to fight. I had to defend myself against this creature, this manifestation of the house's evil. I dropped the crucifix and grabbed a nearby candelabra, raising it above my head like a weapon. The figure lunged, its claws outstretched. I swung the candelabra with all my might, striking the creature in the face. It staggered back, its features contorting in rage. I swung again and again, the candelabra crashing against the creature's flesh. It hissed and snarled, its claws slashing at me, tearing at my clothes. I felt a searing pain as its claws ripped across my arm. I refused to give up. I continued to fight, driven by a desperate will to survive. I knew that if I fell, the house would claim me, that I would become another victim of its insatiable hunger. The battle was brutal and chaotic. The creature was strong and relentless, its movements fueled by centuries of pent-up rage. I was weak and exhausted, my body racked with pain. But I had something the creature did not: hope. I believed that I could escape, that I could survive this ordeal, that I could return to the world outside the house. As the battle raged, I noticed something. The creature seemed to be growing weaker, its movements becoming slower, less deliberate. The light from the candelabra seemed to be burning it, causing its flesh to smolder. I realized that the creature was not invincible. It was vulnerable to the light, to the power of good, and I had the power to defeat it. I focused my energy, channeling all my will into each swing of the candelabra. The creature recoiled, its hisses growing weaker. Its form began to flicker, to fade into the shadows. With a final, desperate blow, I struck the creature in the head. It staggered back, its eyes widening in terror. Its body dissolved into a cloud of smoke, vanishing into the darkness. The second floor was silent, the only sound the echo of my own ragged breathing. I stood there for a moment, catching my breath, trying to comprehend what had just happened. I had defeated the creature. I had survived the house's assault, but I knew the battle was not over. The house was still there, its darkness still pervasive, and I knew that it would not let me go so easily. I picked up the crucifix, its silver surface tarnished by the encounter, and resumed my descent. The whispers were still there, but they were weaker now, their voices filled with fear and uncertainty. I reached the ground floor, my legs trembling with exhaustion. I could see the front door, the gateway to freedom, but I knew that the house would not let me leave without a fight. As I approached the door, the lights flickered, plunging the foyer into darkness. The shadows danced, coalescing into new forms, more grotesque and menacing than before. The house was summoning all its power, preparing for a final confrontation. I knew that if I wanted to escape, I would have to face the darkness head-on. I was not ready, but I was willing. I was going to leave Blackwood Manor. I was going to survive. Chapter 3: The Labyrinth of Echoes. The darkness in the foyer was absolute, a suffocating blanket that seemed to press against my skin. The only source of illumination was the faint moonlight filtering through the grimy windows, casting distorted shadows that danced like malevolent spirits. The whispers had returned, stronger and more insistent than ever, their voices a cacophony of threats and temptations. I gripped the crucifix tightly, its cold metal a small comfort in the oppressive atmosphere. I could feel the house's presence all around me, a palpable force that seemed to test my resolve, to probe my weaknesses. It was as if the very walls were alive, their surfaces pulsating with a dark energy. I knew that the house was trying to break me, to shatter my will and claim my soul. It was a battle of wills, a test of faith, and I was determined to resist, to deny it the victory it craved. I took a deep breath, focusing on my purpose. I had come to Blackwood Manor seeking answers, a glimpse into the heart of darkness. I had found what I was looking for, but at a cost I had not anticipated. Now all I wanted was to escape, to return to the world outside the house, to leave the shadows and whispers behind. But the house would not let me go so easily. It had invested too much in me, revealed too much of itself. It needed me to serve as a conduit for its power, to perpetuate its legacy of darkness. The shadows began to move, coalescing into grotesque forms that blocked my path to the front door. They were twisted parodies of human beings, their limbs elongated and distorted, their faces contorted in expressions of agony and rage. Their eyes burned with an unholy light, reflecting the house's malevolent energy. These were not mere shadows. They were manifestations of the house's power, guardians of its secrets, and enforcers of its will. They were the embodiment of the darkness that had consumed Blackwood Manor, and they were determined to prevent me from escaping. I raised the crucifix, its silver surface gleaming in the moonlight. The shadows recoiled, hissing in pain. They were vulnerable to the symbol of faith, but their hunger was too strong. They continued to advance, their eyes fixed on me, their intentions clear. I knew that I could not defeat them with the crucifix alone. I needed to find another weapon, something that would give me an advantage in the fight. I scanned the foyer, searching for anything that could be used to defend myself. My eyes fell on a large, ornate mirror that hung on the wall opposite the front door. It was an antique mirror, its glass clouded with age, its frame intricately carved with grotesque figures. It was a beautiful object, but its reflection was distorted, creating a funhouse effect that was both unsettling and disorienting. I remembered something I had read in an old occult text. Mirrors were gateways, portals to other dimensions. They could be used to trap spirits, to reflect evil, and to amplify psychic energy. I had never put much stock in such theories, but in the desperate circumstances, I was willing to try anything. I moved towards the mirror, my heart pounding with anticipation. As I approached, the shadows hissed and snarled, their forms growing more menacing. They knew what I was planning, and they were determined to stop me. They lunged, their claws outstretched, their eyes burning with rage. I ignored them, focusing on the mirror. I reached out and touched the glass, its surface cold and smooth. I closed my eyes and concentrated, focusing on my will, on my desire to escape the house. I imagined the mirror as a portal, a gateway to another dimension, a place where the shadows had no power. I imagined myself stepping through the mirror, leaving the house and its darkness behind. As I focused my will, I felt a surge of energy coursing through my body. The mirror began to shimmer, its reflection growing more distorted. The shadows recoiled, their hisses growing weaker. I knew I was on the verge of a breakthrough. I just needed to focus, to maintain my concentration, to believe in the power of the mirror. Then I heard a voice, a soft, seductive voice that seemed to emanate from the mirror itself. It was a voice that promised power, knowledge, and escape. It was the voice of the house, trying to tempt me, to lure me into its trap. "Join us, Elias," the voice whispered. "Embrace the darkness, and you will find what you seek. We can offer you power beyond your wildest dreams, knowledge that will unlock the secrets of the universe and escape from the limitations of your mortal existence. I knew it was a lie, a twisted promise designed to deceive me. But the voice was so seductive, so compelling, that I found myself drawn to it, wanting to believe in its promises. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the voice to resist its temptation. But it was relentless, its whispers growing louder, more insistent. "Don't be afraid, Elias," the voice continued. "We are not your enemies. We are your allies. We can help you achieve your goals, fulfill your desires, and transcend your limitations. All you have to do is surrender, to embrace the darkness, to become one with us." I knew I had to resist, that if I succumbed to the voice I would be lost forever. But the temptation was so strong, the promise of power and knowledge so alluring, that I found myself wavering. Then I remembered something, a memory of my childhood, of my mother's voice reading me bedtime stories, of her unwavering love and support. It was a memory that filled me with warmth and strength, a reminder of the goodness that still existed in the world. I focused on the memory, using it as an anchor, a tether to reality. The voice faltered, its whispers growing fainter. The shadows recoiled, their forms flickering and dissipating. I opened my eyes, my heart pounding in my chest. The mirror was still shimmering, its reflection still distorted. But the voice was gone, and the shadows were no longer threatening. I knew I had passed a test. I had resisted the temptation of the house, and I had reaffirmed my commitment to the light. I took a deep breath and stepped towards the mirror. I reached out and touched the glass, my fingers passing through its surface. I felt a momentary sensation of cold, followed by a dizzying rush of energy. Then I was through. I found myself in another world, a realm of shadows and echoes. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the silence was deafening. The ground beneath my feet was cold and hard like stone. I looked around, trying to make sense of my surroundings. I was in a labyrinth, a maze of twisting corridors and towering walls. The walls were made of black stone, their surfaces carved with grotesque figures. The corridors were dark and narrow, their paths winding and unpredictable. This was the other side of the mirror, the realm of the shadows. It was a place of darkness and despair, a prison for lost souls, and I was trapped within it. I knew that I had to escape, to find my way back to the real world. But the labyrinth was vast and complex, and I had no idea where to start. I began to walk, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The corridors stretched out before me, their paths winding and confusing. The walls seemed to shift and move, disorienting me, making me lose my sense of direction. I walked for hours, my legs growing weary, my hope dwindling. I encountered no other beings, no other signs of life. The labyrinth was a desolate place, a monument to loneliness and despair. Then I heard a sound, a faint, almost imperceptible whisper coming from the depths of the labyrinth. It was a voice that seemed to beckon me, to lure me deeper into the maze. I hesitated. I knew that the voice was a trap, a lure designed to lead me astray. But I was desperate, lost, and alone. I needed guidance, direction, a sign of hope. I decided to follow the voice, to risk everything in the hope of finding a way out of the labyrinth. I turned and walked towards the sound, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The corridors grew narrower, the walls closing in on me. The air grew colder, the scent of decay more intense. The whispers grew louder, their voices more seductive. I knew I was being tested, that the house was trying to break me, to claim my soul. But I refused to give up. I would not succumb to the darkness. I would find my way out of the labyrinth, and I would escape Blackwood Manor. I walked on, my heart pounding with determination. The voice grew louder, drawing me closer to its source. Then I saw it. A light. A faint, flickering light that seemed to beckon me from the depths of the labyrinth. It was a beacon of hope, a sign that I was on the right path. I quickened my pace, my legs pumping with renewed energy. The corridors grew wider, the walls receding. The air grew warmer, the scent of decay fading. I was getting closer. I could feel it. I was about to escape the labyrinth, to return to the real world. Then the voice spoke again. "You are almost there, Elias," it whispered. "Just a little further and you will find what you seek. Power, knowledge, and escape. All you have to do is surrender, to embrace the darkness, to become one with us." I stopped, my heart sinking. I knew it was a trap, a final test designed to break my will. But the voice was so seductive, the promise of escape so alluring, that I found myself wavering. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the voice, to resist its temptation. But it was relentless, its whispers growing louder, more insistent. "Don't be afraid, Elias," the voice continued. "We are not your enemies. We are your allies. We can help you achieve your goals, fulfill your desires, and transcend your limitations. All you have to do is surrender, to embrace the darkness, to become one with us." I knew I had to resist. I had to reject the voice, to deny its promises, to reaffirm my commitment to the light. But the temptation was so strong, the darkness so pervasive, that I felt myself on the verge of collapse. Then I remembered something: the crucifix. I fumbled in my pocket, my fingers trembling, and pulled out the crucifix. It was cold to the touch, a stark contrast to the heat of my fear. I held it tightly, focusing on its shape, its weight, its significance. As I held the crucifix, the voice faltered, its whispers growing fainter, less insistent. The light grew brighter, the corridors wider. The scent of decay faded, replaced by the fresh scent of earth. I opened my eyes, my heart pounding with hope. The light was just ahead, a gateway to freedom. I took a deep breath and ran towards it, leaving the labyrinth and its darkness behind. I emerged from the shadows, blinking in the sudden light. I was back in the real world, standing in the foyer of Blackwood Manor. The shadows were gone, the whispers silent. The house was still there, its darkness still pervasive, but I was free. I had survived the labyrinth. I had resisted the temptation of the house. I had escaped its clutches. But I knew that the battle was not over. The house would not let me go so easily. It would continue to haunt me, to test me, to try to reclaim my soul. I had to be prepared. I had to learn more about the house, about its history, about its secrets. I had to find a way to defeat its darkness, to banish its evil forever. I turned and walked towards the front door, determined to leave Blackwood Manor behind. But as I reached the door, I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. A figure was standing in the doorway, blocking my path. It was a woman, tall and gaunt, her face obscured by shadows. Her eyes burned with an unholy light, reflecting the house's malevolent energy. It was Ellie Blackwood. Chapter 4: The Familiar Stranger. The air in the foyer solidified, the temperature plummeting as the figure in the doorway materialized more clearly. It was a woman, tall and ethereally thin, the shadows clinging to her like a second skin. But calling her Ellie Blackwood felt wrong. The face was familiar, a distorted reflection of the portraits I'd seen, yet something vital was missing, replaced by an unsettling emptiness. Those burning eyes. They held no spark of humanity, only the cold, ancient light of Blackwood Manor itself. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over me, disbelief, horror, and a sliver of something akin to hope. Could it truly be Ellie? After all these years, could she have somehow survived within this haunted place? Or was this another cruel illusion, a twisted mockery conjured by the house to further torment me? She didn't speak, didn't move. She simply stood there, a silent sentinel guarding the only exit. The whispers intensified, swirling around me, their voices now laced with triumph. "She has been waiting for you, Elias," they hissed. "She is the key, she is the gate." I ignored the whispers, focusing on the figure before me. "Ellie," I asked, my voice trembling slightly, "is that really you?" The figure tilted its head, a slow, deliberate movement that sent a shiver down my spine. A smile, thin and unsettling, stretched across its face. "You know me, Elias," it whispered, its voice a chilling echo of the woman in the portraits. "We have always been connected." The use of my name, the eerie familiarity in her voice, it was unnerving, but I refused to be swayed by emotion. I needed proof, something tangible to confirm her identity. "If you're Ellie," I said, "tell me something only she would know, something about our childhood." The figure paused as if searching for the right words. Then it spoke, its voice barely a whisper. "The tree house, in the woods behind our house. We carved our initials into the trunk inside a heart. EB and JT." It was true. I could vividly recall that treehouse, a sanctuary we had built together, a place where we had shared our dreams and fears. It was a memory that only Ellie and I could have known. But even with that confirmation, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The figure before me was not the sister I remembered. It was a twisted imitation, a hollow shell possessed by something ancient and malevolent. "I remember," I said, my voice barely audible. "But you're not Ellie, not really. You're something else, something the house has created." The smile on the figure's face widened, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp, too predatory. "You wound me, Elias," it whispered. "Don't you recognize your own sister? We have been together all along, trapped within these walls, bound by the darkness." It took a step closer, and I recoiled, instinctively raising the crucifix. The figure hissed, its eyes narrowing, but it didn't stop its advance. "The crucifix will not protect you, Elias," it said. "It has no power here. This is my domain, my home, and you are my guest. Forever." I knew I had to act. I couldn't let this twisted mockery of my sister, keep me trapped within Blackwood Manor. I had to find a way to escape, to break free from its clutches. I lowered the crucifix, pretending to surrender. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "Why are you doing this?" The figure paused, its eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "I want what you want, Elias," it whispered. "Knowledge, power, and escape. We can achieve it all together. All you have to do is embrace the darkness to become one with the house." "I'll never do that," I said, my voice filled with defiance. "I'll never surrender to the darkness." The figure's smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure rage. "Then you are a fool, Elias," it hissed. "You will regret your defiance. You will suffer for your disobedience." It lunged, its claws outstretched, its eyes burning with hatred. I sidestepped its attack, narrowly avoiding its grasp. I knew I couldn't defeat it in a direct confrontation. It was too strong, too fast, too infused with the house's power. I had to use my wits to find a weakness to exploit its vulnerabilities. I remembered the occult text I had read, the one that mentioned mirrors. It said that they could be used to trap spirits, to reflect evil. I had used the mirror to escape the labyrinth, but perhaps it could also be used as a weapon. I glanced at the ornate mirror on the wall, its surface shimmering in the moonlight. It was my only hope. I turned and ran, leading the figure towards the mirror. It pursued me relentlessly, its footsteps echoing in the silent foyer. I could feel its presence closing in, its claws reaching out to grab me. I reached the mirror and turned to face the figure, raising the crucifix in my hand. It hissed, recoiling slightly. "You cannot stop me, Elias," it said. "I am the house, I am the darkness, I am inevitable." "Maybe," I said, my voice filled with defiance, "but I'm not going down without a fight." I lunged forward, smashing the crucifix against the surface of the mirror. The glass shattered, sending shards flying in all directions. A wave of energy erupted from the mirror, engulfing the figure in its light. It screamed, its body contorting in agony. The shadows that clung to it began to dissipate, revealing the true form beneath. It was a woman, gaunt and pale, her face etched with pain and despair. It was Ellie. But even as I saw her, I knew it was too late. The house had consumed her, body and soul. She was beyond saving. The figure collapsed to the floor, its body dissolving into a cloud of smoke. The whispers faded, their voices replaced by an eerie silence. I stood there, panting, my body trembling with exhaustion. I had defeated the figure, but I had lost my sister. The realization hit me like a physical blow, leaving me gasping for air. I had come to Blackwood Manor seeking answers, but all I had found was death and despair. I had hoped to save Ellie, but I had only condemned her to oblivion. I knelt beside the remains of the figure, my heart filled with grief. I reached out and touched the spot where her hand had been, my fingers brushing against a small, silver locket. I picked it up, recognizing it instantly. It was a locket that Ellie had worn since childhood, a gift from our parents. It contained a picture of the two of us, taken when we were children. I opened the locket, my heart aching with memories. The picture was faded, but I could still see our faces, our smiles filled with innocence and joy. I closed the locket, clutching it tightly in my hand. It was all I had left of Ellie, a tangible reminder of the sister I had lost. I stood up, my legs trembling, and walked towards the front door. I had to leave Blackwood Manor to escape its darkness, to put an end to its reign of terror. As I reached the doorway, I paused, looking back at the shattered mirror. The foyer was filled with debris, the air thick with the scent of dust and decay. I knew that I could never forget what had happened here, that the memories of Blackwood Manor would haunt me for the rest of my life. But I also knew that I had to move on, to find a way to live with the darkness, to carry the memory of Ellie with me always. I took a deep breath and stepped through the doorway, leaving Blackwood Manor behind. The outside world was bathed in moonlight, the air crisp and cool. I walked away, not looking back, determined to find peace, to honor the memory of my sister, and to finally lay the ghosts of Blackwood Manor to rest. Or so I hoped. Chapter 5: The Shadow of Hollow Creek. The crisp mountain air filled my lungs, a welcome change from the stagnant, oppressive atmosphere of Blackwood Manor. Moonlight painted the overgrown grounds in shades of silver and shadow, transforming the familiar landscape into something alien and unsettling. I walked away from the house, each step carrying me further from its malevolent influence. Yet the weight of the experience remained, a heavy burden on my soul. The locket, clutched tightly in my hand, was my only solace, a tangible link to the sister I had lost within those crumbling walls. I glanced back at the manor, its silhouette stark against the night sky. It stood silent, a monument to its own evil, waiting for its next victim. I shuddered, knowing that I could never truly escape its shadow. As I made my way back to the cabin, the small town of Hollow Creek seemed to hold its breath, the silence broken only by the chirping of crickets and the rustling of leaves. The houses were dark, their windows like vacant eyes staring out at the night. I felt a strange sense of unease, as if I were being watched, as if the town itself was aware of what had transpired at Blackwood Manor. I reached the cabin, its familiar warmth a welcome contrast to the chilling atmosphere I had just left. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, the smell of wood smoke and pine needles filling my senses. It was a simple, rustic cabin, but it was my sanctuary, a place where I could feel safe, at least for a little while. I locked the door behind me, drawing the curtains to shut out the unsettling moonlight. I turned on the lights, bathing the cabin in a warm, golden glow. I needed to ground myself, to reconnect with reality, to convince myself that what had happened at Blackwood Manor was not just a nightmare. I went to the small kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, my hands still trembling slightly. I drank it slowly, savoring the taste, letting it soothe my parched throat. I needed to calm down, to clear my head, to figure out what to do next. I sat down at the wooden table, placing the locket in front of me. I opened it again, gazing at the faded picture of Ellie and me. We were so young, so innocent, so full of hope. How could something so beautiful have been corrupted by such darkness? The locket was a reminder of what I had lost, but it was also a source of strength. It reminded me of the bond that Ellie and I had shared, the love that had sustained us through so many challenges. I had to honor her memory, to find a way to bring peace to her soul. I closed the locket, clutching it tightly in my hand. I knew what I had to do. I had to find a way to destroy Blackwood Manor, to eradicate its evil forever. It was a daunting task, but I couldn't rest until it was done. I spent the rest of the night researching, poring over the occult texts I had brought with me. I needed to learn more about the house, about its history, about its weaknesses. I needed to find a way to break its power, to sever its connection to the darkness. I learned that Blackwood Manor had been built on an ancient burial ground, a site that had been used for pagan rituals for centuries. Silas Blackwood had known about this, and he had deliberately chosen the location for his home, hoping to tap into its dark energy. He had been obsessed with the occult, delving into forbidden knowledge, performing dangerous rituals, and making sacrifices to ancient entities. He had believed that he could control the forces of darkness, that he could use them to achieve his own selfish goals. But he had been wrong. The darkness had consumed him, corrupting his soul and transforming him into a monster. He had become a prisoner of his own creation, trapped within Blackwood Manor for eternity. I learned that the house was more than just a building. It was a living entity, a manifestation of the darkness that had taken root within it. It fed on fear, despair, and death, growing stronger with each passing year. The only way to destroy the house was to sever its connection to the burial ground, to purify its soil, and to banish the entities that resided within it. It was a dangerous task, but I was determined to do it. As the sun began to rise, casting a pale light over the mountains, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I had a plan, a course of action. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was ready to face the challenge. I packed my gear, gathering the supplies I would need for my next expedition to Blackwood Manor. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the horrors that awaited me. I stepped out of the cabin, the morning air crisp and invigorating. The town of Hollow Creek was slowly coming to life, its residents beginning their daily routines. I walked towards the center of town, hoping to gather more information, to find someone who could help me. I stopped at the local diner, a small, unassuming establishment that seemed to be the heart of the community. I went inside, the smell of coffee and bacon filling my senses. It was a welcome change from the stale, musty odors of Blackwood Manor. The diner was nearly empty, save for a few locals who were quietly sipping their coffee and reading the newspaper. I sat down at the counter, ordering a cup of coffee and a plate of scrambled eggs. As I ate, I listened to the conversations around me, hopping to pick up some useful information. The locals were talking about the weather, about the upcoming harvest festival, and about the recent disappearances. The disappearances. It was a topic that had been on my mind since I arrived in Hollow Creek. People had been vanishing without a trace, their disappearances attributed to accidents or wanderings in the vast wilderness surrounding the town. But I knew the truth. Blackwood Manor was responsible. The house was claiming its victims, feeding on their souls and adding to its dark power. I decided to ask the diner owner, a kindly old woman named Martha, about the disappearances. "Martha," I said, "I've been hearing about people going missing around here. Do you know anything about it?" Martha sighed, her face clouding with concern. "It's been happening for years, son," she said. "Every few years someone disappears. The police do what they can, but they never find anything. Folks just vanish into thin air." "Do you have any idea what's causing it?" I asked. Martha hesitated, glancing around the diner as if afraid of being overheard. "Some folks say it's the house," she whispered. "Blackwood Manor. They say it's cursed, that it takes people who get too close." "Do you believe that?" I asked. Martha shrugged. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she said. "But I do know that something bad is happening in this town, and I'm afraid it's going to get worse." I nodded, my heart sinking. I knew that Martha was right. The darkness was spreading, infecting the town, and it wouldn't stop until it had consumed everything. I finished my breakfast, thanking Martha for her time. I left the diner, feeling a renewed sense of urgency. I had to act quickly before more people disappeared, before the darkness claimed Hollow Creek completely. I walked towards the town library, hoping to find more information about Blackwood Manor and the surrounding area. The library was a small, quaint building, filled with dusty books and the scent of old paper. I spent hours searching through the archives, poring over old maps, newspapers, and historical documents. I learned about the history of Hollow Creek, about its founding, about its struggles, and about its connection to Blackwood Manor. I discovered that the town had been named after a local legend, a tale of a hidden valley where a sacred spring flowed. The spring was said to have healing powers, capable of curing any disease. But the valley had also been home to dark forces, entities that sought to corrupt the spring and use its power for their own evil purposes. The town's founders had been tasked with protecting the spring, with keeping the dark forces at bay. They had succeeded for centuries, but Silas Blackwood had changed everything. He had deliberately sought to awaken the dark forces, to unleash them upon the world. He had failed, but he had left a legacy of evil that continued to haunt Hollow Creek to this day. I learned that there were several ley lines, invisible lines of energy, that converged at Blackwood Manor. These ley lines connected the house to other sacred sites in the area, including the hidden valley and the sacred spring. Silas Blackwood had known about these ley lines, and he had used them to amplify his power, to channel the dark energy of the burial ground into the house. The only way to destroy the house was to disrupt these ley lines, to sever its connection to the source of its power. I left the library, my mind buzzing with information. I had a new plan, a more precise strategy. I knew what I had to do, and I was ready to do it. I returned to the cabin, gathering my gear and preparing for my next expedition to Blackwood Manor. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the horrors that awaited me. I stepped out of the cabin, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the mountains. The town of Hollow Creek seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for what was to come. I walked towards Blackwood Manor, determined to confront the darkness, to destroy its power, and to finally bring peace to Hollow Creek. My journey was just beginning. The road to Blackwood Manor would be a long one. Chapter 6: The Geometry of Fear. The walk to Blackwood Manor felt different this time. The initial dread and morbid curiosity had been replaced by a grim determination, a focused intent. I was no longer simply investigating a haunted house. I was preparing for war. The afternoon sun, usually a source of comfort, now felt like a spotlight, highlighting the malevolence that radiated from the decaying estate in the distance. As I approached the wrought iron gate, I noticed a change. The overgrown ground seemed even more still than before. The wind, which usually rustled through the trees, had ceased, leaving the leaves hanging motionless. The birds, which normally filled the air with their songs, were silent. It was as if nature itself was holding its breath, anticipating the coming conflict. I pushed open the gate, the familiar screech echoing in the unnatural stillness. The air grew heavy, the temperature dropping noticeably. I could feel the house's presence, its dark energy reaching out to me, testing my resolve. I ignored it, focusing on my plan. I knew that the key to destroying Blackwood Manor was to disrupt the ley lines that converged at the house. According to the research I had done at the library, these ley lines connected the house to other sacred sites in the area, including the hidden valley and the sacred spring. I needed to find these ley lines, to map their course, and to identify the points where they could be disrupted. It was a complex task, but I had a few tools that could help me. I had brought with me a compass, a dowsing rod, and a set of ancient runes, symbols that were said to have the power to detect and manipulate energy. I didn't know if they would actually work, but I was willing to try anything. I began my search at the center of the property, near the front door of the house. I set up my compass and watched as the needle spun wildly, unable to find a true north. This was a clear indication that the ley lines were distorting the magnetic field, disrupting the natural order of things. I took out the dowsing rod, a forked branch made of hazelwood, and held it out in front of me. I closed my eyes and concentrated, focusing on the ley lines, asking them to reveal themselves to me. After a few moments, the dowsing rod began to tremble in my hands. It pulled me forward, leading me towards a specific point on the property. I opened my eyes and followed the rod, its movements guiding me through the overgrown grounds. The rod led me to a small clearing, hidden among the trees. In the center of the clearing was a large, flat stone, covered in moss and lichen. I recognized it instantly. It was a marker stone, a relic of the pagan rituals that had been performed on this site for centuries. I knew that this was a key point, a place where the ley lines converged. I placed my hand on the stone, feeling its cold, ancient energy. I closed my eyes and concentrated, trying to sense the flow of energy to map its course. After a few moments, I felt a tingling sensation in my hand, a faint vibration that seemed to emanate from the stone. I opened my eyes and saw that the dowsing rod was pulling me in different directions, indicating that the ley lines radiated outwards from this point, connecting to other sacred sites. I took out my notebook and began to sketch a map, marking the location of the marker stone and the approximate direction of the ley lines. It was a slow, painstaking process, but I was determined to be thorough. I spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the grounds, following the ley lines and mapping their course. I discovered that they connected Blackwood Manor to the hidden valley, the sacred spring, and several other ancient sites in the area. I also discovered that the ley lines were not static. They shifted and moved, their course influenced by the house's dark energy. It was as if the house was alive, breathing, and using the ley lines to control the flow of energy in the area. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the grounds, I realized that I had to go inside the house. I knew that the ley lines also ran through the interior, and I needed to map their course to understand how the house was using them. I approached the front door, my heart pounding with apprehension. I knew that the house would not welcome me, that it would fight back, that it would try to trap me within its walls. But I was determined to face the challenge. I had come too far to turn back now. I took a deep breath and pushed open the door, stepping back into the darkness. The interior of the house was even more oppressive than before. The shadows seemed to deepen, to writhe in the periphery of my vision. The whispers had returned, louder and more insistent, their voices a cacophony of threats and temptations. I ignored them, focusing on my task. I took out the dowsing rod and began to explore the house, following the ley lines and mapping their course. The rod led me through the foyer, into the parlor, the dining room, and the library. It led me up the grand staircase, into the bedrooms, the study, and the attic. It led me through the labyrinth of corridors and chambers, revealing the house's hidden geometry, its dark secrets. I discovered that the ley lines converged at several key points within the house, including the fireplace in the parlor, the dining room table, the bed in the master bedroom, and the altar in the attic. These were all places where Silas Blackwood had performed his rituals, where he had channeled the dark energy of the burial ground into the house. I also discovered that the ley lines were not confined to the physical structure of the house. They extended into the other dimensions, connecting the house to other realms of existence. It was as if the house was a portal, a gateway to other worlds. As I explored the house, I felt an increasing sense of unease. The darkness was closing in on me, testing my resolve, probing my weaknesses. I could feel the house's presence, its malevolent energy reaching out to me, trying to corrupt my soul. I tried to ignore it to focus on my task, but the house was relentless. It whispered in my ear, it showed me visions, it preyed on my fears. It was as if the house was trying to break me, to shatter my will and claim my soul. I knew that I had to be careful. I couldn't let the house get inside my head. I had to maintain my focus, to remember my purpose, to resist its dark influence. As the night wore on, the whispers intensified, coalescing into a chorus of voices, each speaking in a different language, each offering a different temptation. Some spoke of power, of the ability to control the forces of nature, to bend reality to my will. Others spoke of knowledge, of unlocking the secrets of the universe, of understanding the mysteries of life and death. And still others spoke of immortality, of transcending the limitations of the physical body, of living forever in a realm of pure consciousness. I knew these were lies, twisted promises designed to lure me further into the darkness. But the voices were so seductive, so compelling, that I found myself drawn to them, wanting to believe in their promises. The shadows continued to dance, their forms growing more defined, more threatening. They circled me, closing in, their eyes burning with an unholy light. I could feel their presence, their hunger, their desire to consume me. I knew then that I had to act. I had to find a way to disrupt the ley lines, to sever the house's connection to the darkness. I had to find a way to destroy Blackwood Manor, to eradicate its evil forever. I took out the set of ancient runes, symbols that were said to have the power to manipulate energy. I had studied them for years, but I had never actually used them. I didn't know if they would work, but I was willing to try anything. I closed my eyes and concentrated, focusing on the ley lines, visualizing their course, feeling their energy. I selected a few of the runes, symbols that were said to have the power to disrupt energy, to break connections, to banish evil. I opened my eyes and began to place the runes at key points along the ley lines, at the fireplace in the parlor, at the dining room table, at the bed in the master bedroom, and at the altar in the attic. As I placed the runes, I felt a surge of energy, a tingling sensation that ran through my body. The house seemed to react, its shadows writhing, its whispers growing louder, its presence more oppressive. I knew that I was disrupting the ley lines, that I was weakening the house's power. But I also knew that I was provoking it, that I was making it angry, that I was unleashing its full fury. I had to be careful. I had to be prepared for anything. I had to be ready to fight. I finished placing the runes, my heart pounding in my chest. The house was silent, its shadows still, its whispers faint. It was as if it was holding its breath, waiting. Then the house erupted. The lights flickered, plunging the house into darkness. The shadows danced, coalescing into grotesque forms that blocked my path. The whispers returned, louder and more insistent than ever, their voices a cacophony of threats and temptations. The floor began to tremble, the walls to shake. The house was coming apart, its structure collapsing, its darkness unleashed. I knew that I had to escape. I had to get out of the house before it destroyed me. I turned and ran, heading for the front door, the only way out. But the house was blocking my path. The shadows were closing in, the whispers were deafening, the darkness was overwhelming. I had to fight, I had to defend myself, I had to survive. I raised the crucifix in my hand, warding off the shadows, silencing the whispers. I fought my way through the collapsing house, dodging falling debris, avoiding the grasping shadows. I reached the front door, my heart pounding with relief. I pushed it open and stepped outside, breathing in the fresh air, feeling the cool breeze on my face. I had escaped Blackwood Manor, but the battle was far from over. The house was still standing, its darkness still pervasive, and I knew that it would not rest until it had claimed my soul. Chapter 7: The Ritual of Ruin. The air outside Blackwood Manor was a blessed respite, a temporary sanctuary from the suffocating darkness that clung to the house like a shroud. I stumbled away from the front door, my legs heavy, my lungs gasping for air. The crucifix, still clutched in my hand, felt cold against my skin, a reminder of the battle I had just endured and the war that was far from over. I had disrupted the ley lines, weakened the house's power, but I had also enraged it. The tremors, the collapsing walls, the unleashed fury, all were signs that I had struck a nerve, that I had inflicted a wound that Blackwood Manor would not easily forget. It was now a wounded animal, and a wounded animal, as I knew all too well, was a dangerous one. I needed to regroup, to reassess my strategy, and to prepare for the inevitable counterattack. I needed to find the sacred spring, the final point of convergence for the ley lines, and to perform a ritual that would sever the house's connection to the darkness forever. But first, I needed to get back to the cabin to rest, to heal. My body was bruised and battered, my mind exhausted, my spirit weary. I had to be strong, for I knew that the house would not give me much time. I turned and walked towards the tree line, moving as quickly as my aching limbs would allow. I risked a glance back at Blackwood Manor. Even from a distance, its presence was palpable, its malevolent energy radiating outwards like a dark aura. The house seemed to loom, a silent threat against the backdrop of the night. As I walked, I replayed the events of the night in my mind, trying to understand what I had done, what I had missed, and what I needed to do next. I had mapped the ley lines, placed the runes, and disrupted the house's power, but I had also made myself its primary target. I had to be careful. The journey back to the cabin was uneventful, save for the unsettling feeling of being watched, of being pursued. I didn't see anything, didn't hear anything, but I sensed the house's presence, its cold, calculating gaze. I reached the cabin and fumbled with the key, finally unlocking the door. I stepped inside, the familiar warmth and comfort a welcome contrast to the chilling darkness I had just left. I locked the door behind me, drawing the curtains to shut out the night. I collapsed onto the bed, my body aching with fatigue. I removed my clothes, examining my injuries. My arms and legs were covered in bruises and scratches, and there was a deep gash on my left arm, a reminder of the creature's claws. I cleaned the wound and applied antiseptic, wincing at the sting. After I was done, I closed my eyes and tried to rest, but sleep eluded me. My mind was racing, filled with images of the house, of Ellie, of the darkness that threatened to consume everything. I knew that I had to focus, to put aside my fear and my grief, and to concentrate on the task at hand. The fate of Hollow Creek, perhaps even the world, rested on my shoulders. I forced myself to get up and walk towards the small table where I had laid out my research. I needed to find out more about the ritual that I needed to perform at the sacred spring. According to the ancient texts, the ritual involved several components: a purification rite, a summoning of benevolent forces, and a banishment of the evil entities. It was a complex and dangerous process, requiring precise incantations, specific ingredients, and a deep understanding of the occult. I spent hours poring over the texts, searching for the information I needed. I learned about the specific herbs, oils, and crystals that were required for the purification rite. I learned about the incantations that needed to be recited, the specific gestures that needed to be performed. I also learned about the dangers of the ritual. If performed incorrectly, it could backfire, unleashing the evil forces that I was trying to banish. It was a high-stakes game, a battle of wills, and I had to be prepared to risk everything. As the sun began to rise, casting a pale light over the mountains, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I had a plan, a course of action. I knew what I had to do, and I was ready to do it. I packed my gear, gathering the supplies I would need for my next expedition. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the horrors that awaited me. I stepped out of the cabin, the morning air crisp and invigorating. The town of Hollow Creek seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for what was to come. I walked towards the hidden valley, the location of the sacred spring. The journey was long and arduous, requiring me to navigate through dense forests, over rugged terrain, and across fast-flowing streams. I felt the house's presence all around me, its malevolent energy reaching out to me, trying to dissuade me from my purpose. I ignored it, focusing on my destination. I knew that the house would try to stop me, to prevent me from completing the ritual. I had to be strong, to be resilient, to be unwavering in my determination. The fate of Hollow Creek depended on me. I finally reached the entrance to the hidden valley, a narrow passage hidden among the trees. I stepped through the passage and entered the valley, my breath catching in my throat. The valley was a place of incredible beauty, a hidden paradise untouched by the ravages of time. A crystal-clear stream flowed through the center of the valley, its waters reflecting the sunlight. The air was filled with the scent of wild flowers and fresh earth. This was the sacred spring, the source of the town's healing power. It was a place of peace, of serenity, of hope. It was also the final point of convergence for the ley lines, the place where I needed to perform the ritual. I walked towards the spring, my heart pounding with anticipation. I knew that the house would not allow me to perform the ritual without a fight. I had to be ready. I set up my equipment, preparing for the ritual. I laid out the herbs, the oils, and the crystals, arranging them in a specific pattern according to the ancient texts. I cleansed the area, purifying the air and banishing any lingering traces of evil. I took a deep breath and began the purification rite, reciting the ancient incantations, performing the specific gestures. I could feel the energy of the ley lines flowing through me, connecting me to the earth, to the cosmos. As I performed the rite, I sensed the house's presence growing stronger, its malevolent energy reaching out to me, trying to disrupt my concentration. I ignored it, focusing on the ritual, on the power of the ancient words. The air began to shimmer, the sunlight to distort. The shadows danced, coalescing into grotesque forms that threatened to disrupt my focus. The whispers returned, louder and more insistent than ever, their voices a cacophony of threats and temptations. I resisted, clinging to the power of the ritual, to the strength of my will. I continued the incantations, performing the gestures, channeling the energy of the ley lines. Then the house attacked. The ground beneath my feet began to tremble, the stream to surge. The air grew thick with darkness, and the shadows coalesced into a massive, monstrous figure that lunged at me, its claws outstretched, its eyes burning with rage. It was a creature of pure evil, a manifestation of the house's power, a guardian of the sacred spring. It was determined to stop me, to prevent me from completing the ritual. I knew that I had to fight, that I had to defend myself against this creature, this embodiment of the darkness. I raised the crucifix in my hand, warding off its attacks, and I began to recite the final incantation of the purification rite, focusing on its syllables. But the creature was too strong, too fast, too powerful. It swatted the crucifix away and lunged at me, its claws tearing at my flesh. I fell to the ground, my body racked with pain. The creature stood over me, its eyes burning with triumph. It was about to deliver the final blow, to end my life, to prevent me from completing the ritual. Then I remembered something. A memory of Ellie, of her bravery, of her unwavering spirit. I saw her face, her smile, her eyes filled with love and hope. I channeled her strength, her courage, her determination. I refused to give up. I refused to surrender to the darkness. I closed my eyes and focused, summoning the power of the benevolent forces, the ancient spirits that were said to inhabit the valley. I began the incantation for the second part of the ritual, the summoning of help. It was a desperate act, a gamble, but I had no other choice. I had to call upon the forces of good to fight against the darkness, to save myself in Hollow Creek. As I recited the incantation, I felt a surge of energy, a wave of power that flowed through me. The air began to shimmer, the light to grow brighter. The creature recoiled, its body flickering, its form becoming less defined. I opened my eyes and saw that the valley had changed. The stream was now glowing with a golden light. The wildflowers were blooming with vibrant colors, and the air was filled with a sense of peace and serenity. The benevolent forces had arrived. The creature screamed, its body dissolving into a cloud of smoke. It was gone. I had survived. I stood up, my body aching, my spirit weary. I had faced the darkness and I had prevailed, but the battle was far from over. I had to complete the ritual. I had to banish the evil from Blackwood Manor, to sever its connection to the sacred spring, and to bring peace to Hollow Creek. I took a deep breath and began the final incantation of the ritual, the banishment of the evil entities. I focused my energy, my will, and my intention. I channeled the power of the benevolent forces, the energy of the ley lines, and the strength of my love for Ellie. As I recited the incantation, the air began to tremble, the earth to shake. The sky darkened and a storm erupted. I felt a wave of energy flowing from the spring, a torrent of light that enveloped Blackwood Manor, tearing it apart, dissolving it, and banishing its evil forever. The darkness was gone. I had done it. I had destroyed Blackwood Manor, and I had saved Hollow Creek. Chapter 8: The Echo of Absolution. The storm raged, a furious cleansing of the land mirroring the turmoil I had just weathered. Lightning illuminated the valley in stark, fleeting flashes, revealing the raw power of nature unleashed. I stood amidst the downpour, soaked to the bone but strangely at peace. The malevolent presence that had clung to this area for so long was gone, replaced by a palpable sense of serenity, a lightness that seemed to permeate the very air. The ritual had worked. Blackwood Manor, the epicenter of darkness, was no more. Its evil had been purged, its connection to the sacred spring severed, its reign of terror brought to an end. Yet despite the victory, a profound sadness lingered. The memory of Ellie, her laughter, her spirit, and the tragic fate that had befallen her weighed heavily on my heart. I had avenged her, I had cleansed the land, but I couldn't bring her back. The void she had left behind would remain, a constant reminder of the darkness that had once held sway. As the storm began to subside, a soft light emerged from the sacred spring. It wasn't the harsh glare of lightning, but a gentle, ethereal glow that seemed to emanate from the very depths of the water. The light grew stronger, illuminating the valley with a warm, inviting radiance. I approached the spring, drawn by an irresistible force. The water was crystal clear, its surface reflecting the sky like a mirror. I knelt down, gazing into its depths, and saw a vision. It was Ellie. She was standing in a field of wildflowers, her long red hair flowing in the breeze, her eyes sparkling with joy. She was smiling, a genuine, heartfelt smile that I hadn't seen since we were children. "Thank you, Elias," she said, her voice soft and clear. "You have set me free. I am at peace now." I reached out to touch her, but my hand passed through her image. She was a vision, a memory, a spirit freed from the clutches of Blackwood Manor. "I love you, Ellie," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "I'll never forget you." "I love you too, Elias," she said. "Goodbye." Her image faded, dissolving into the light of the spring. The vision was over. I stood up, wiping the tears from my eyes. I felt a sense of closure, a sense of absolution. Ellie was at peace, and I had fulfilled my promise to her. I turned and walked away from the spring, leaving the valley behind. The sun was beginning to rise, casting a golden light over the mountains. The storm had passed, and a new day had dawned. The journey back to Hollow Creek was uneventful. I walked slowly, savoring the peace and quiet, reflecting on the events of the past few weeks. I had faced my fears, I had confronted the darkness, and I had emerged victorious. But I had also learned a valuable lesson. I had learned that darkness is not something to be chased, to be sought out, to be embraced. It is something to be fought, to be resisted, to be eradicated. I reached the town, its streets slowly coming to life. The residents were emerging from their homes, their faces filled with curiosity and anticipation. They had sensed the change, the absence of the oppressive energy that had haunted Hollow Creek for so long. I walked towards the town center, where a small crowd had gathered. Martha, the diner owner, saw me and rushed over, her face filled with relief. "Elias," she said, "what happened to the house? It's gone." "I destroyed it, Martha," I said. "It's over. The darkness is gone." A cheer erupted from the crowd. The residents of Hollow Creek had been freed from their nightmare. They had been given a new lease on life. I spent the next few days in Hollow Creek, helping the town recover from the darkness. I told them about Blackwood Manor, about Silas Blackwood, and about the forces of evil that had been unleashed. They listened intently, their faces filled with a mixture of horror and gratitude. They thanked me for my courage, for my sacrifice, for saving their town. I also helped them to rebuild their community, to restore their faith, and to embrace the future. I showed them the sacred spring, the source of their healing power, and I taught them how to protect it from future threats. As the days passed, I felt a sense of healing, a sense of renewal. The darkness had left Hollow Creek, but it had also left its mark on me. I would never be the same. I knew that I couldn't stay in Hollow Creek forever. I had to move on, to continue my journey, to seek out new challenges. But I would never forget the town, the people, or the darkness that I had faced. I packed my gear, preparing to leave. The residents of Hollow Creek gathered to say goodbye, their faces filled with gratitude. "Thank you, Elias," Martha said, her eyes filled with tears. "You saved us, you gave us hope." "You saved yourselves, Martha," I said. "You had the strength to resist the darkness. I just helped you to unleash it." I said my goodbyes and walked away, leaving Hollow Creek behind. The sun was shining brightly, and the air was filled with the scent of wild flowers. A new chapter had begun. As I walked, I clutched the locket in my hand, remembering Ellie's face, her smile, her eyes filled with love and hope. I knew that she would always be with me, guiding me, protecting me. I had destroyed Blackwood Manor, but I had also found peace, and I had found a renewed sense of purpose. I would continue my journey, seeking out new challenges, fighting against the darkness, and honoring the memory of my sister. The world was a vast and dangerous place, but I was no longer afraid. I had faced my fears, and I had emerged victorious. I was ready for whatever lay ahead. My journey was just beginning, and maybe, just maybe, I can finally be free. But only time will tell. Only time will tell. Chapter 9: The Traveler's Rest. The open road stretched before me, a ribbon of asphalt winding through the rolling hills of Appalachia. The map showed a route south, towards warmer climates, towards new mysteries, perhaps. But the truth was, I didn't have a destination in mind. I was simply moving, propelled by an inner restlessness, a need to keep the memories of Blackwood Manor at bay. The sun beat down on the hood of my battered pickup truck, baking the metal and turning the cab into a sweltering oven. I cranked up the air conditioning, a small luxury I allowed myself, and flipped through the radio stations, searching for a distraction. Static and snippets of country music filled the airwaves, offering little solace. I pulled off the highway at a roadside diner, a faded sign proclaiming "Travelers Rest" in peeling paint. It looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1950s. It was exactly the sort of place I was looking for, anonymous, isolated, and unlikely to hold any connection to my recent past. The diner was a single-story building, constructed of cinder blocks and painted a sickly shade of yellow. A few rusty gas pumps stood out front, relics of a bygone era. The parking lot was mostly empty, save for a couple of dusty sedans and a semi-truck idling in the distance. I parked the truck and stepped out, the heat hitting me like a wall. The air smelled of grease and stale coffee, a familiar aroma that was both comforting and slightly depressing. I stretched my stiff limbs and walked towards the diner, the locket containing Ellie's picture swinging gently against my chest. The interior was dimly lit, the windows grimy and obscuring the midday sun. Red vinyl booths lined the walls, and a long formica counter stretched across the front of the room. A lone waitress stood behind the counter, wiping it down with a rag. She was a woman of indeterminate age, her face etched with wrinkles that spoke of hard living. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and she wore a faded blue uniform. Her eyes, however, were sharp and intelligent, taking in my appearance with a practiced gaze. "Find a seat," she said, her voice raspy but not unkind. "I'll be with you in a minute." I nodded and slid into a booth near the back, choosing a spot that offered a view of the parking lot. I needed to keep an eye on my surroundings, a habit that had become ingrained since my encounter with Blackwood Manor. The waitress approached, a pad and pen in her hand. "What can I get for you, hun?" she asked. "Just coffee for now," I said, "black." She poured me a cup of coffee from a stained carafe, the aroma rich and strong. "Anything else?" she asked. "Maybe later," I said. "I'm just passing through." She nodded, accepting my answer without question. "Long drive?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Been on the road for a while." "I know the feeling," she said. "This place sees a lot of travelers. Some stay for a while, some just pass through. We're a good stopping point." "That's what I figured," I said. She left me to my coffee, returning to her task of wiping down the counter. I sipped the coffee, savoring the bitter taste. It was strong and hot, just what I needed. As I sat there, I began to notice the details of the diner. The walls were decorated with faded photographs of local landmarks, and the ceiling was covered in a patchwork of mismatched tiles. A jukebox stood in the corner, its chrome finish tarnished with age. The other patrons were a mixed bag. A truck driver nursing a cup of coffee, a family with young children, and an elderly couple holding hands. They all seemed weary, worn down by the road, seeking a moment of respite before continuing their journey. The diner was a liminal space, a place between places, a sanctuary for travelers seeking rest and sustenance. It was a place where stories were shared, where secrets were kept, and where connections were made. I felt a strange sense of connection to these people, these strangers who were bound together by their shared experience of travel. We were all seeking something, whether it was a new destination, a fresh start, or simply a temporary escape from the realities of our lives. The waitress approached again, her eyes filled with curiosity. "You know," she said, "I haven't seen you around here before. What brings you to these parts?" I hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. I didn't want to draw attention to myself, to risk attracting the wrong kind of attention. But something about the waitress's kind eyes and gentle demeanor made me trust her. "I was in Hollow Creek," I said, "just dealing with some family business." Her expression changed, a shadow of sadness crossing her face. "Hollow Creek, huh?" she said. "That's a troubled place." "You know about it?" I asked, surprised. She nodded. "Everyone around here knows about Hollow Creek," she said. It's got a bad reputation. People say it's cursed. It was, I said, but it's not anymore. I took care of it. She raised an eyebrow, her eyes filled with skepticism. You did, huh? She said. That's quite a claim. It's the truth, I said. I destroyed Blackwood Manor. Her eyes widened, her jaw dropping slightly. Blackwood Manor, she said. You're kidding me. I'm not, I said. It was a long story. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Tell me, she said. I've heard stories about that place for years. I always wondered if they were true. I hesitated, but I knew I could trust her. I had a feeling that she understood more than she let on, that she had her own secrets, her own connection to the darkness. I took a deep breath and began to tell her my story, starting with my arrival in Hollow Creek, my investigation of Blackwood Manor, and my encounter with Ellie. I told her about the ley lines, the rituals, and the creatures that haunted the house. I told her about my battle against the darkness and my final victory at the sacred spring. As I spoke, the waitress listened intently, her eyes never leaving mine. She didn't interrupt, didn't question, didn't judge. She simply listened, offering me a space to share my story, to unburden my soul. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment, her face filled with a mixture of awe and sorrow. That's incredible, she said finally. I can't believe what you went through. It was a nightmare, I said, but it's over now. Is it? She asked, her eyes filled with doubt. You can never truly escape the darkness, Elias. It's always there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its chance to return. Her words sent a chill down my spine. I knew she was right. The darkness was always there, a part of me, a part of the world. It could never be truly eradicated, only contained. What do you mean? I asked, my voice filled with apprehension. She sighed, her face growing somber. Blackwood Manor wasn't the only place of darkness, she said. There are others, scattered throughout the world, waiting to be awakened. Where? I asked, my heart pounding. She hesitated, unsure of whether to reveal more. I can't tell you, she said finally. It's too dangerous. You've already done enough. Please, I said. I need to know. I can't just walk away knowing that there are other places like Blackwood Manor out there. She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes searching mine. She saw my determination, my commitment, my willingness to risk everything. All right, she said finally. I'll tell you what I can, but you have to promise me that you'll be careful. This is a dangerous path you're on, Elias. It can lead to nothing but pain and suffering. I understand, I said. I promise. She took a deep breath and leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. There's a town, she said, in the mountains of West Virginia. It's called Silent Hollow. They say it's a place where the veils between worlds are thin, where the dead walk the earth, and where the ancient gods still hold sway. Silent Hollow, I repeated, the name sending a chill down my spine. It's a place of darkness, Elias, she said, a place where the evil never sleeps. I knew what I had to do. I had to go to Silent Hollow. I had to face the darkness once more. I stood up, my body filled with a renewed sense of purpose. Thank you, I said to the waitress. You've given me what I needed. Be careful, Elias, she said, her eyes filled with concern. "And remember, the darkness is always watching." I nodded and walked out of the diner, stepping back into the heat of the afternoon sun. I climbed into my truck and started the engine. I had a new destination, a new challenge, and a new battle to fight. Silent Hollow awaited, and I was ready, or so I told myself. Chapter 10: Whispers of Silent Hollow. The drive to Silent Hollow was long and arduous, taking me through winding mountain roads, past abandoned coal mines, and into the heart of West Virginia's haunting wilderness. The landscape itself seemed to reflect the darkness that I was heading towards, shrouded in mist, scarred by industry, and steeped in a history of hardship and loss. The waitress's words echoed in my mind, a constant reminder of the dangers that lay ahead. Silent Hollow, a place where the veils between worlds are thin, where the dead walk the earth, and where the ancient gods still hold sway. It sounded like something out of a Gothic novel, a place of pure nightmare fuel. As I neared Silent Hollow, I noticed a distinct change in the atmosphere. The air grew colder, the wind picked up, and the sky darkened as if a storm was brewing. The trees, once lush and green, became gnarled and twisted, their branches reaching out like skeletal arms. The road narrowed, winding through a dense forest that seemed to press in on all sides. I could feel the eyes of unseen creatures watching me from the shadows, their presence both unnerving and strangely familiar. Finally, I saw it, a sign, weathered and barely legible, proclaiming "Welcome to Silent Hollow." It was a grim welcome, a promise of something sinister. The town itself was even more desolate than I had imagined. It was nestled in a deep valley, surrounded by towering mountains that blocked out the sun. The buildings were dilapidated, their windows boarded up, their paint peeling. The streets were empty, save for a few stray dogs that slunk through the shadows. Silent Hollow looked like a ghost town, a place where time had stood still, where life had withered and died. It was a place of profound silence, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the creaking of wind-battered signs. I drove through the town, searching for a place to stay. I passed a few abandoned motels, their signs long since faded, their rooms likely filled with dust and decay. Finally, I saw a sign that read "The Old Miners' Inn," a small, two-story building that looked marginally less dilapidated than the others. I pulled into the parking lot and got out of the truck, the silence pressing down on me. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something acrid and unsettling. The inn looked deserted, its windows dark and its door closed. I walked towards the entrance, my hand resting on the crucifix in my pocket. I had a feeling that I was going to need it. I knocked on the door, the sound echoing in the stillness. After a few moments, I heard footsteps inside, slow and deliberate. The door creaked open, revealing a man standing in the doorway. He was tall and gaunt, his face pale and gaunt, his eyes sunken and dark. He wore a faded flannel shirt and overalls, his clothes looking as if they hadn't been washed in weeks. He looked like a ghost, a remnant of a bygone era. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice raspy and low. "I'm looking for a room," I said, "just for the night." He hesitated, his eyes scrutinizing me. "We don't get many travelers around here," he said. "I know," I said. "I'm just passing through." He nodded slowly as if considering my answer. "All right," he said finally. "I got one room left. It ain't much, but it's clean." He opened the door wider, gesturing for me to enter. I stepped inside, the darkness of the inn swallowing me whole. The interior was dimly lit, the only source of illumination being a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. The air was thick with the scent of dust and mildew. The furniture was old and worn, covered in a layer of grime. The inn felt oppressive, claustrophobic, as if the walls were closing in on me. It was a place where the shadows danced, where the whispers lingered, where the darkness reigned supreme. The man led me down a narrow hallway, past a series of closed doors. Each door seemed to radiate a sense of unease, as if something sinister was lurking behind it. He stopped at the end of the hallway, unlocking a door with a rusty key. "This is it," he said. "Room number 7. He pushed open the door, revealing a small, Spartan room. It contained a single bed, a rickety dresser, and a small window that looked out onto the mountains. The air was stale and musty, as if the room hadn't been aired out in years. "It's not much," the man said, "but it's a place to sleep." "It's fine," I said. "How much do I owe you?" He told me the price, which was surprisingly cheap. I paid him in cash. He didn't even bother counting it, pocketing the crumpled bills with a gesture that spoke of long-held resignation. "Breakfast is served downstairs at 7, he mumbled, already turning to leave. "Don't expect much." "Thanks," I said. He gave a curt nod and shuffled back down the hallway, the silence swallowing him whole. I stepped into the room, closing the door behind me. I surveyed my surroundings. The bed was lumpy, the sheets thin and worn. The dresser was covered in dust and the window was cracked. It was exactly the Ritz, but it was shelter. I dropped my bag on the floor and sat down on the bed, feeling the springs groan beneath my weight. I ran a hand over my face, trying to shake off the weariness that threatened to consume me. I needed to rest, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something sinister was lurking just beyond the walls. I took out the crucifix and held it in my hand, feeling its familiar comfort. I closed my eyes and prayed, asking for guidance, for protection, for the strength to face whatever lay ahead. After a few moments, I opened my eyes, feeling a sense of renewed determination. I couldn't let fear paralyze me. I had to be proactive, to investigate the town, to uncover its secrets. I got up and walked towards the window, peering out at the landscape. The mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks shrouded in mist. The town was eerily quiet, the only sound being the wind whistling through the dilapidated buildings. I noticed something strange. The shadows seemed to be moving, shifting and swirling as if they were alive. They seemed to be drawn towards the center of town, towards a large, imposing building that stood on a hill overlooking everything. It was a church. Its steeple pierced the sky, a skeletal finger pointing towards a heavens that seemed deaf to the town's suffering. Even from this distance, I could sense a palpable aura of darkness emanating from the church, a feeling that made my skin crawl. I knew that was where I needed to go. That was the heart of the evil that plagued Silent Hollow. That was where I would find the answers I sought. I decided to wait until morning to investigate. I needed to rest, to conserve my energy, and to approach the church with a clear head. I spent the rest of the evening reading, poring over my occult texts, searching for information about Silent Hollow and its history. I learned that the town had been founded in the 18th century by a group of religious zealots who believed that they had been chosen to build a new Jerusalem in the wilderness. They had been led by a charismatic preacher named Jedediah Blackwood, a distant relative, I suspected, of the Silas Blackwood that had haunted my recent past. I am certain that there has to be some link between them. Jedediah Blackwood had been a man of extreme beliefs, preaching a message of fire and brimstone, of judgment and damnation. He had demanded absolute obedience from his followers, controlling every aspect of their lives. As the years passed, Jedediah Blackwood had grown increasingly paranoid, convinced that the forces of evil were conspiring against him. He had begun to perform strange rituals, sacrifices to appease the ancient gods, and to protect his flock from the darkness. These rituals had grown increasingly violent, culminating in the death of several townspeople who had been accused of witchcraft. Jedediah Blackwood had been arrested and tried for murder, but he had been acquitted, thanks to the unwavering support of his followers. After his release, Jedediah Blackwood had retreated to the church, where he had spent the rest of his days in seclusion, continuing his rituals and growing ever more consumed by the darkness. He eventually died within the church, but his story goes on. It is thought that he was never given his peace, and now still guards the entrance to the church. His spirit is a constant, and always searching for those who are good of heart to corrupt them. He is a dark soul with immense power and a powerful pull. As I read, I felt a growing sense of dread. Silent Hollow was not just a haunted town. It was a place where evil had taken root, where darkness had been cultivated, and where the ancient gods still held sway. I knew that I was walking into a trap, but I had no choice. I had to stop the darkness, to protect the innocent, and to bring peace to Silent Hollow. Finally, exhaustion overtook me, and I drifted off to sleep, the crucifix clutched tightly in my hand. I awoke to the sound of church bells, their mournful tones echoing through the town. It was 7 o'clock, time for breakfast. I got out of bed, feeling stiff and sore. I washed my face and brushed my teeth, trying to shake off the lingering effects of the nightmare I had just endured. I walked downstairs, following the scent of coffee and bacon. The inn was empty, save for the gaunt man who had checked me in the previous evening. He was standing behind the counter, wiping it down with a rag. "Morning," I said. He grunted in response, pointing towards a small table in the corner. "Breakfast is over there," he said. "Help yourself." I walked towards the table, finding a plate of scrambled eggs, bacon, and toast. It wasn't much, but it was fuel. I ate quickly, the greasy food settling uneasily in my stomach. As I ate, the gaunt innkeeper watched me with unnerving intensity, his dark eyes piercing through me. I tried to ignore him, focusing on my plan for the day. After finishing breakfast, I thanked the innkeeper and walked out of the inn, stepping into the gloomy morning. The town was even more deserted than it had been the previous day. The silence was deafening, broken only by the creaking of the wind and the distant tolling of the church bells. I walked towards the church, my heart pounding with apprehension. The closer I got, the stronger the feeling of unease became. The air grew colder, the shadows deepened, and the whispers intensified. I reached the church, standing before its imposing facade. It was a massive stone structure, built in a Gothic style, its facade adorned with grotesque carvings of demons and gargoyles. The stained glass windows were dark and opaque, as if they had been painted black. The church looked less like a house of worship and more like a fortress of evil, a place where darkness thrived and hope died. I approached the front door, a heavy oak portal reinforced with iron bands. I hesitated, my hand trembling as I reached out to touch it. I knew that crossing this threshold would be a point of no return. I took a deep breath and pushed open the door, stepping into the abyss. The interior of the church was even more oppressive than I had imagined. The air was thick with the scent of incense and decay, and the silence was absolute, broken only by the echo of my own footsteps. The nave was vast and cavernous, its ceiling soaring high above me. The walls were lined with rows of pews, their wooden surfaces worn smooth by years of use. A red carpet stretched down the center aisle, leading towards the altar. The altar was a massive stone slab, adorned with carvings of skulls and bones. A large crucifix hung above it, its silver surface tarnished and blackened. The entire scene was bathed in a dim, eerie light that filtered through the stained glass windows. I walked down the center aisle, my footsteps echoing in the silence. As I approached the altar, I noticed something strange. The crucifix was moving, swaying gently from side to side as if it was being pushed by an unseen force. I stopped, my heart pounding with apprehension. I knew that I was not alone. Something was here, watching me, testing me. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling slightly. "Is anyone there?" The silence was unbroken. I continued walking towards the altar, my eyes scanning the shadows. As I got closer, I noticed that the altar was stained with blood, fresh blood. My blood ran cold. I reached the altar, standing before the crucifix. It was still swaying gently, its silver surface reflecting the dim light. I reached out and touched it, feeling a surge of energy coursing through my body. Then I heard a voice. "Welcome, Elias," it said, its tone smooth and seductive. "I've been expecting you." I whirled around, searching for the source of the voice. I saw nothing. "Who's there?" I asked, my voice trembling. "Show yourself." The voice chuckled, a low, guttural sound that made my skin crawl. "I am everywhere, Elias," it said. "I am in the air you breathe, the ground you walk on, the very walls of this church." I looked around, my eyes darting from shadow to shadow. The voice seemed to be coming from everywhere at once, surrounding me, suffocating me. "What do you want?" I asked. "I want what you want, Elias," the voice said. "Power, knowledge, immortality." I don't want any of those things, I said. I just want to leave. The voice chuckled again. That's not true, Elias, it said. You're just afraid to admit it. You're afraid of the darkness, but you're also drawn to it. You crave it. That's a lie, I said. Is it? The voice asked. Think about it, Elias. You've spent your entire life chasing the unknown, delving into forbidden knowledge, seeking out the secrets of the universe. You're a seeker, Elias, and I can give you what you're looking for. I don't want anything from you, I said. I just want to help these people, to free them from this darkness. They can't be helped, Elias, the voice said. They're already lost, they're mine. That's not true, I said. There's still hope for them. There is no hope, Elias, the voice said. There is only darkness, and soon you will be mine as well. The shadows began to move, coalescing into grotesque forms that surrounded me. I could feel their presence, their hunger, their desire to consume me. I knew that I was in danger. I was trapped in the church, surrounded by evil and facing a powerful enemy. I had to find a way to escape. I took out the crucifix and held it in front of me, warding off the shadows. I will not succumb to you, I said, my voice filled with determination. I will not let you win. The voice laughed, a cold, heartless sound that echoed through the church. We'll see about that, Elias, it said. We'll see about that. I felt that now is the time for me to leave. Chapter 11, The Sermon of Shadows. The voice, a disembodied presence that seemed to saturate the very air, ceased its taunting laughter. But the oppressive silence that followed was arguably more unnerving. The shadows surrounding me writhed and pulsed, their grotesque forms solidifying, becoming more defined. They were no longer mere illusions. They were entities, drawn from the depths of some unholy realm, and they were closing in. I gripped the crucifix tighter, its smooth surface the only tangible connection to the world of light, the world beyond the suffocating darkness of the church. I knew that I couldn't stay here, that I couldn't face these creatures in a direct confrontation. My only chance was to escape, to find a way out of this unhallowed place. I scanned the nave, searching for an exit. The front door through which I had entered was now blocked by a wall of shadows, their forms shifting and swirling, their eyes burning with malevolent intent. It was a dead end. My gaze fell upon a side door located near the altar. It was partially obscured by a tapestry, its wooden frame warped and cracked. It was a long shot, but it was my only hope. I took a deep breath and began to move towards the side door, my eyes fixed on the shadows, my body tensed for action. The creatures hissed and snarled, their forms contorting in frustration. They knew what I was planning, and they were determined to stop me. As I approached the door, the shadows lunged, their claws outstretched, their eyes filled with hatred. I raised the crucifix, warding off their attacks, and continued to move forward, my pace quickening. The creatures were relentless, their attacks becoming more frequent, more ferocious. I dodged and weaved, narrowly avoiding their grasp, feeling the heat of their breath on my skin. The air was thick with the scent of decay and sulfur, a nauseating combination that made my head spin. I reached the side door and ripped the tapestry away, revealing the warped and cracked frame. The door was locked, but the wood was rotten, easily splintered. I slammed my shoulder against the door, the wood groaning in protest. The lock held, but the frame began to crack. I slammed my shoulder against the door again, this time with more force. The wood splintered, the lock snapping, the door flying open. I stumbled through the doorway into a narrow hallway. The air was slightly less oppressive here, the shadows less intense. But I knew that I wasn't safe yet. The voice, the creatures, the darkness, they were all still there, pursuing me, closing in. I ran down the hallway, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The hallway was lined with doors, each leading to a different room in the church. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew that I had to keep moving. I reached the end of the hallway and turned a corner, finding myself in a small, circular chamber. The walls were lined with bookshelves, their shelves filled with ancient tomes, their spines covered in dust. A single window looked out onto the town, offering a glimpse of the outside world. It was a library. I had stumbled upon the church's library, a repository of knowledge, a sanctuary for the mind. But it was also a place of darkness, a place where forbidden secrets were kept and where dangerous ideas were born. I scanned the bookshelves, searching for a weapon, a tool, anything that could help me in my fight. My eyes fell upon a large, leather-bound book, its cover embossed with a symbol that I recognized from my occult texts. It was the Liber Malorum, the Book of Evil, a grimoire said to contain the secrets of the dark arts, the incantations for summoning demons, and the rituals for achieving ultimate power. It was a dangerous book, a source of corruption, a gateway to madness. But it was also a weapon, a tool that could be used against the darkness. I reached out and grasped the Liber Malorum. The leather felt cold and slick against my skin, and a jolt of energy surged through my body. The whispers intensified, their voices a chorus of enticement and warning. "Take it, Elias," they hissed. "Embrace the power, become one with the darkness." I ignored the whispers, focusing on the book. I had to resist its allure, to control its power, to use it for good. I opened the Liber Malorum, its pages filled with arcane symbols, cryptic diagrams, and indecipherable text. The air grew heavy, the temperature dropped, and the shadows deepened. The church seemed to pulse with a dark energy, responding to the book's presence. I flipped through the pages, searching for a spell, a ritual, anything that could help me to banish the evil from Silent Hollow. I found a passage that described a ritual for cleansing a corrupted space, a rite that involved the invocation of benevolent forces and the banishment of malevolent entities. It was a complex ritual, requiring specific ingredients, precise incantations, and unwavering focus. But it was my only hope. I gathered the necessary ingredients from the library, finding herbs, oils, and crystals hidden among the bookshelves. I arranged them on a small table in the center of the room, preparing for the ritual. As I worked, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. The shadows moved closer, their forms growing more menacing. I could feel the presence of the entities that haunted the church, their hunger growing, their desire to consume me intensifying. I ignored them, focusing on the ritual. I had to be strong, to be resolute, to resist their influence. I lit a candle, its flickering flame casting eerie shadows on the walls. I took a deep breath and began the incantation, reciting the ancient words, channeling my will into each syllable. As I spoke, the air grew thick with energy. The room began to shimmer, the shadows to dance. The church seemed to pulse with a dark rhythm, responding to my power. The door to the library burst open, revealing the creatures that had been pursuing me. They were tall and gaunt, their limbs elongated and distorted, their faces contorted in expressions of agony and rage. Their eyes burned with an unholy light, reflecting the church's malevolent energy. They lunged at me, their claws outstretched, their eyes filled with hatred. I raised the liber malorum, warding off their attacks, and continued to recite the incantation, my voice growing louder, more powerful. The creatures recoiled, hissing in pain. They were vulnerable to the book's power, but their hunger was too strong. They continued to advance, their eyes fixed on me, their intentions clear. I knew that I had to finish the ritual to unleash its full power, to banish the evil from Silent Hollow. But the creatures were relentless, their attacks becoming more frequent, more ferocious. I had to find a way to defend myself, to buy myself time, to complete the ritual. I remembered something I had read in the Liber Malorum, a spell for creating a protective barrier, a shield that would ward off evil entities. I quickly flipped through the pages, searching for the spell. The words swam before my eyes, the symbols blurred. The creatures were closing in, their claws reaching out to tear me apart. I found the spell, my heart pounding with relief. I began to recite the incantation, my voice trembling with adrenaline. As I spoke, a shimmering barrier of light appeared around me, warding off the creature's attacks. The barrier was strong, but it wouldn't hold forever. The creatures were relentless, their attacks growing more forceful, their determination unwavering. I had to finish the ritual, and I had to do it now. I took a deep breath and focused, channeling all my energy, all my will, into the final words of the incantation. The library vibrated with power, the air crackling with unseen forces. The protective barrier shimmered, buckling under the relentless assault of the entities, but it held. With a final, desperate surge of will, I completed the incantation. The Liber Malorum flared with an intense, blinding light, and a shockwave of energy exploded outwards, engulfing the library, shaking the very foundations of the church. The creatures shrieked, their forms dissolving into smoke, their eyes extinguished. The protective barrier shattered, its light fading into nothingness. The library fell silent, the only sound the echo of my own ragged breathing. I had banished the creatures, at least for now, but the ritual was far from over. The cleansing had begun, but it had not yet reached its climax. I closed the Liber Malorum, its power still radiating from its leather-bound cover. I knew that I couldn't keep the book. It was too dangerous, too corrupting. It had to be destroyed. But not yet. I needed its power one last time to complete the cleansing of Silent Hollow. I left the library, walking back into the nave. The church was eerily silent, the shadows still, the air heavy with the scent of ozone. I approached the altar, standing before the crucifix. The crucifix was no longer swaying. It was still, silent and strangely expectant. I raised the liber malorum, its cover reflecting the dim light. I began the final phase of the ritual, the banishment of the evil that had taken root within the church. As I recited the incantation, the church began to tremble. The walls shook, the ceiling groaned, and the floor vibrated beneath my feet. The carvings of demons and gargoyles on the walls seemed to writhe and twist, their expressions growing more malevolent. The crucifix began to glow, its silver surface radiating a blinding light. The light intensified, engulfing the altar, the nave, the entire church. Then a figure emerged from the light. It was a man tall and gaunt, his face pale and gaunt, his eyes sunken and dark. He wore a long black robe, his hands clasped in prayer. His presence radiated an aura of power, of authority, of unwavering conviction. It was Jedediah Blackwood. He looked at me, his eyes burning with intensity. "You cannot stop me, Elias," he said, his voice resonating with power. "This church is mine. This town is mine. These people are mine." "You're wrong, Jedediah," I said, my voice trembling but resolute. "This church belongs to God. This town belongs to the people, and these people are free to choose their own destiny." "They have already chosen," Jedediah said. "They have chosen me. They have embraced the darkness. They have surrendered their souls." "That's a lie," I said. "Is it?" Jedediah asked. He gestured towards the shadows, which began to move, coalescing into the forms of the townspeople. They were gaunt and pale, their eyes empty and lifeless. They wore tattered clothes, their bodies were covered in sores, and their faces were contorted in expressions of pain and despair. They were the walking dead, the victims of Jedediah Blackwood's evil, the slaves of his dark will. "These are my flock, Elias," Jedediah said. "They are mine to command, mine to control, mine to torment." "They are not yours," I said. "They are human beings, deserving of compassion, deserving of salvation." "There is no salvation, Elias," Jedediah said. "There is only power, and I have the power to control them, to use them, to destroy them." He raised his hands, and the townspeople shuffled forward, their empty eyes fixed on me. They moved with a slow, deliberate grace, their movements unnatural, their bodies contorted. They were an army of the damned, a legion of shadows, and they were closing in. "Join me, Elias," Jedediah said, his voice laced with a chilling promise. "Embrace the darkness, become one with the power, rule this town with me, rule the world." I refused to give in. I knew that I had to fight, that I had to defend myself, that I had to save the people of Silent Hollow. I raised the liber malorum, its cover glowing with an unholy light. I began the final incantation, the ultimate banishment. The church began to shake, the air to crackle with energy. The light from the crucifix intensified, clashing with the dark energy emanating from Jedediah. He roared, his voice echoing through the church, a sound of fury and defiance. "You cannot defeat me, Elias. I am the master of this domain." The townspeople lunged, their hands outstretched, their eyes burning with hatred. I unleashed the power of the liber malorum, sending a wave of energy that pushed them back, throwing them against the walls. Jedediah launched an assault of his own, a torrent of dark energy that struck me, sending me stumbling backward. I felt a searing pain, a burning sensation that seemed to consume my very being. I fought back, reciting the incantation, channeling my will, my strength, my desperation. I could feel the power of the liber malorum flowing through me, empowering me, strengthening me. The battle raged. Jedediah unleashed waves of dark energy, attempting to break my spirit, to corrupt my soul. I countered with the power of the liber malorum, pushing back against his attacks, striving to maintain my focus. The townspeople attacked again and again, their numbers seemingly endless. I fought them off, using the book's spells to repel them, to drive them back. The church was in ruins. The walls were cracked, the ceiling was collapsing, and the floor was covered in debris. The light from the crucifix and the liber malorum illuminated the chaos, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. I was weakening, my body racked with pain, my spirit weary. I knew that I couldn't last much longer. Jedediah approached, his face contorted in a cruel smile. "You have fought well, Elias," he said, "but you cannot win. The darkness is too strong. You are mine." He raised his hands, preparing to deliver the final blow. I closed my eyes, preparing for the end. Then I remembered Ellie. I saw her face, her smile, her eyes filled with love and hope. I heard her voice, urging me to fight, to never give up. I opened my eyes, my heart filled with a renewed sense of determination. I would not surrender. I would not fail. I channeled Ellie's strength, her courage, her spirit. I unleashed the full power of the liber malorum, focusing my energy, my will, and my intention. The church exploded with light. The liber malorum shone brighter than the sun, its energy washing over everything. The crucifix shattered, its silver fragments scattering across the floor. Jedediah screamed, his form dissolving into smoke, his voice echoing through the church, a sound of agony and despair. The townspeople disintegrated, their forms fading into nothingness. The darkness was gone. The light subsided, leaving the church in a state of utter destruction. The walls were crumbled, the ceiling was collapsed, and the floor was covered in rubble. The air was clear, and the silence was absolute. I stood there, exhausted, battered, and bruised, but alive. I had survived. I had destroyed Jedediah Blackwood, and I had banished the evil from Silent Hollow. I had done what I had set out to do. I had brought peace. But the price had been high. The liber malorum had been destroyed, and the church was in ruins. I walked out of the church, stepping back into the daylight. The town was transformed. The shadows had vanished, and the buildings were no longer dilapidated. The streets were clean, and the air was filled with the sound of bird song. The people of Silent Hollow emerged from their homes, their faces filled with joy and gratitude. They were alive, they were well, and they were free. They gathered around me, thanking me for my courage, for my sacrifice, for saving their town. I smiled, my heart filled with a sense of accomplishment. I had done what I had set out to do. I had faced the darkness, and I had prevailed. But I knew that my journey was far from over. The world was a vast and dangerous place, and the darkness was always lurking. I turned and walked away from Silent Hollow, leaving the town behind. My journey was just beginning. The future was uncertain, but I was ready. I was prepared for whatever lay ahead. Chapter 12. The Mapmaker's Silence. The rearview mirror showed me Silent Hollow shrinking in the distance, another dark chapter etched into the ever-growing tome of my life. The town, resurrected from the clutches of Jedediah Blackwood, was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of hope. But the victory felt hollow, a bittersweet echo in the vastness of my solitude. The truck rumbled down the highway, eating up the miles with a steady, almost rhythmic cadence. The sun beat down on the cracked windshield, turning the cab into a furnace. I kept the windows down, letting the wind whip through my hair, trying to clear my head. I had destroyed Blackwood Manor, I had cleansed Silent Hollow, but the darkness persisted, a lurking presence at the edges of my perception. It was a constant reminder that the battle was never truly over, that evil was an eternal force, always seeking new avenues for expression. I reached into my pocket, my fingers brushing against the silver locket, my touchstone to Ellie, the reason I had embarked on this perilous journey. I opened it, gazing at the faded photograph of us as children, our faces beaming with innocence. Her memory was a guiding light, a beacon in the darkness, but it was also a source of pain, a constant reminder of what I had lost. I closed the locket, clutching it tightly in my hand. I had to keep moving forward to honor her memory by continuing to fight the darkness, to protect the innocent, to bring peace to the world. I pulled off the highway at a gas station, needing to refuel both the truck and myself. The station was a dusty, run-down establishment, its sign barely hanging on by a thread. The air smelled of gasoline and exhaust. I filled the truck with gas, then went inside to grab a soda and a snack. The clerk was a young man, his face pale and gaunt, his eyes tired and distant. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. He barely acknowledged me, simply ringing up my purchase and handing me my change. He seemed lost in his own world, oblivious to the darkness that lurked in the shadows. I left the gas station, feeling a sense of unease. I could sense the presence of something sinister, a lingering energy that reminded me of Blackwood Manor and Silent Hollow. I climbed back into the truck and started the engine, my heart pounding with apprehension. I knew that I couldn't stay here. I had to keep moving. As I pulled onto the highway, I noticed a figure standing by the side of the road. It was an old woman, dressed in rags, her face wrinkled and lined. She was holding a sign that read, "Need a ride." I hesitated. I didn't usually pick up hitchhikers, but something about this woman intrigued me. She seemed to be calling out to me, her presence drawing me in. I pulled over to the side of the road, rolling down the window. "Where are you headed?" I asked. The woman smiled, her teeth yellowed and broken. "Nowhere in particular," she said. "Just wherever the road takes me." "Hop in," I said. She climbed into the truck, her movements slow and deliberate. She smelled of dirt and something else, something ancient and musty. "Thank you, young man," she said, her voice raspy and low. "I appreciate the kindness." "No problem," I said. We drove in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the hum of the engine. Then the woman spoke. "You have a darkness about you," she said. "I can sense it. You have seen things, you have done things that have scarred your soul." I was taken aback. "What do you mean?" I asked. "You have faced the darkness," she said. "You have fought against the evil. You have prevailed. But the darkness lingers, doesn't it? It never truly goes away." I didn't deny it. Her words resonated, striking a chord deep within me. "How do you know?" She chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "I've seen many dark things in my long life, young man. I am a map maker of sorts. I chart the hidden places, the forgotten paths where the shadows gather." "A map maker?" I asked, intrigued despite myself. "Indeed," she said, her eyes gleaming with a strange light. "I know the ley lines, the nexus points, the places where the veils are thin. I know where the darkness festers and where the light struggles to survive." She pulled a worn, leather-bound journal from a tattered satchel. Its cover was blank, but the edges of the pages were dog-eared and stained. "And I have a proposition for you, Elias." She opened the journal, revealing intricate maps, swirling symbols, and cryptic notations. It was a collection of drawings and writings, a cartography of the occult, a roadmap to the nightmares that plagued the world. "I have seen your deeds," she said, her finger tracing a path on one of the maps. "You possess a gift, a rare ability to perceive the unseen. You are a warrior, Elias, and the world needs warriors. There are more places, more horrors, more threats than you could possibly imagine." She pointed to a specific location on the map, a cluster of symbols that I recognized as the signs of an old, forbidden cult. "There is a darkness brewing in the Louisiana bayou. They are said to be raising a creature of immense power, a thing of ancient evil." She moved her finger, gliding towards another section of the map, a region of the Pacific Northwest, which was labeled with a different set of strange symbols. "And there are whispers of a forest where the dead walk, a place ruled by an entity of unimaginable malice." "This is incredible," I breathed, both horrified and captivated. "What do you want me to do?" She closed the journal, her gaze meeting mine. "The world is in desperate need of someone to protect it, Elias. Someone with your courage, your skill, your resolve. I need you to help me, to fight the darkness, to use your gift." I stared at her, torn between the comfort of a solitary existence and the call of duty. The darkness of Blackwood Manor and Silent Hollow had taught me that running was futile, that evil would always seek its opportunity. This woman, this mapmaker, was offering me a new purpose, a new challenge. But it was also a promise of unending peril. I looked down at the locket, the picture of Ellie staring back at me. I knew what she would want me to do. She would want me to fight, to protect the innocent, to make a difference. "What do you say, Elias?" the woman asked, her eyes filled with a quiet intensity. "Will you join me?" I took a deep breath, and the words I spoke felt like a vow. "Yes," I said, "I will." A slow smile spread across the woman's face. "Excellent," she said. "Then let us begin. We have a long journey ahead of us, and the first stop, the Louisiana bayou. She closed her journal and the truck rumbled onward into the heart of the setting sun. The road stretched before us, a pathway to unknown dangers but also to a new beginning. The fight would continue. The darkness would persist. But I was ready. I had a new ally, a new purpose, and a renewed determination to protect the world, one shadowed corner at a time. The journey would be difficult, but I had found something to live for again, and it was time to begin. The end.